If you want to understand Gen X, you have to understand what it felt like to grow up invisible. Born roughly between 1965 and 1980, Gen X came of age in a world that was changing fast but didn't stop to explain itself. This generation didn't grow up with participation trophies or constant praise. They grew up with house keys around their necks, empty homes after school, and the quiet expectation that they would figure things out on their own. Gen X is often called the middle child generation, stuck between the massive influence of baby boomers and the cultural dominance of millennials. But psychologically, that position shaped them in powerful ways. They learned early not to rely on institutions, not to expect loyalty from employers, and not to assume that authority figures always knew what they were doing. Many Gen Xers grew up during rising divorce rates, economic uncertainty, and shifting social norms. This created a deep sense of self-reliance. When support systems felt unstable, independence became survival. Psychologically, this shows up as a strong internal locus of control. Gen X tends to believe that if something is going to get done, they have to do it themselves. This is also why Gen X is famously skeptical. They watched political scandals unfold on TV, saw corporations downsize without warning, and learned that promises often came with fine print. As a result, Gen X doesn't trust hype. They trust experience. They value authenticity over enthusiasm and competence over charisma. Emotionally, Gen X is often misunderstood. They're not cold or detached, but they are emotionally restrained. Many were raised in environments where emotional expression wasn't encouraged. Deal with it was more common than talk about it. This created a generation that feels deeply but expresses selectively. They're private, not distant. Observant, not disengaged. Their humor reflects this perfectly. Gen X humor is dry, ironic, and often dark. It's a coping mechanism. When you grow up learning to adapt quietly, humor becomes a way to process stress without making a scene. Sarcasm isn't negativity for Gen X. It's emotional intelligence with armor on. One of the most defining psychological traits of Gen X is adaptability. They are the bridge between analog and digital worlds. They remember life before the internet, but they also learn to use technology as it evolved. This makes them flexible thinkers. They're comfortable with change, but only when it serves a real purpose. They don't chase trends, they evaluate them. In the workplace, Gen X values autonomy more than titles. They don't need constant feedback, and they don't want to be micromanaged. This comes from growing up self-directed. Psychologically, they associate freedom with competence. If you trust them to handle a task, they'll take ownership. If you hover, they'll disengage. Gen X also tends to prioritize work-life balance long before it became a buzzword. They saw their parents sacrifice personal lives for jobs that didn't always return the favor, so they learned to separate identity from occupation. For Gen X, work is important, but it's not who they are. Relationships matter deeply to Gen X, but they approach them realistically. They value loyalty, consistency, and shared responsibility. Grand gestures matter less than showing up. This generation learned that stability isn't glamorous, but it's powerful. Psychologically, they seek reliability over intensity. As parents, many Gen Xers took a different approach from how they were raised. They aimed to be more present, more emotionally aware, while still encouraging independence. They didn't want their children to feel as alone as they sometimes did, but they also didn't want to remove every obstacle. This balance reflects their core psychology. Care deeply, but don't coddle. Gen X's relationship with identity is also unique. They don't define themselves loudly. They don't need constant validation. This doesn't mean they lack confidence. It means their confidence is internal. They're comfortable not being the center of attention, which in a social media-driven world can look like disengagement, but it's actually grounded self-awareness. Today, Gen X often plays the role of quiet stabilizer. They manage teams, raise families, and hold systems together without demanding applause. Their psychological strength lies in resilience. They've learned to navigate uncertainty without panic, and responsibility without resentment. So if Gen X sometimes seems reserved, skeptical, or unimpressed, understand that it's not apathy. It's wisdom earned through experience. They are the generation that learned to survive without a manual, adapt without complaining, and move forward even when no one was watching. And that might be their most defining trait of all.